So welcome everyone to Talkaoke. Welcome those online. You are, of course, also welcome on the Zoom. The link should be below. So join in on that one. We're just kicking off, and the official theme of this particular Talkaoke, or I will warn those who are newcomers to Talkaoke that Talkaoke can go in any which direction the participants want to take it. So we don't really know where this is going to go, but the starting point is all about genomics and COVID, and has the role of genomics really been highlighted? And do people, I mean, in the previous Talkaoke discussion, we're talking quite a lot about awareness of genomics. But are people aware of the role of genomics in research into COVID? And how might the key role of genomics influence future attitudes towards investment in genomics? Is this genomics time to shine? So these are some of the opening questions. I don't know if they tickle the fancy of anyone here. Anyone want to kick us off? Any starting point? Are people aware of what role genomics has played in COVID research? Maybe if anyone is, you better let us know, because my role as a talk show host doesn't really cover that kind of knowledge. So anyone want to kick us off and give us a bit of context? There goes Natalie. Rebecca, can you say a little bit about this, maybe?
Yes. Well, very briefly, I can, is that the fact that we are realizing that during this pandemic that genomics has become even more important to do, and is something that we really need to take part in. But I don't really have much more to say at this point. I'm really interested in what Natalie has to say. So,
hi, Natalie.
Yeah, hi. I'm literally just joining, so
don't worry, we're just starting this off. So welcome, thanks for joining in. We've kind of in a way, we've been hit by the organizers of the festival with this question, but we are actually, Talkaoke is a free-form talk show where everyone is invited. And the problem is with this question that we've been given is we don't actually know really enough about it, but we're talking about the role of genomics in COVID research, but nobody really knows what that role is here on the talk. So, you know, do you know anything about it, Natalie?
yeah.
Okay, come on then. Well, great. I'm going to give you a round of applause and
worth it. Already it was worth it to join. All right, so let me kick us off, and I'm not sure what the backgrounds of the people who are here are, but let me kick us off with saying that genomic data is very important in subject susceptibility to COVID-19. Does everyone agree to that?
Yeah, I think you've got a general nod there. Yeah.
Cool. All right. And with that said, the one thing that is important to do for COVID-19 patients is actually, once we have enough data, to put every piece of data that we have on those patients and to model the profiles of the patients who are most susceptible, are at highest risk for severe outcomes, and are at highest risk of dying from COVID-19. So that's sort of how I see the picture, the most important side of it.
So in a way, you can understand a lot more about the patient using genomics, and you've really got much more to go on in terms of how to treat that patient using genomics. Is that fair to say?
Treat that patient, yes, but also to have a profile of a patient who should really be careful with COVID-19 and who should be the first vaccinated.
Right.
We have, and I mean, that kind of thing has been done already during the first couple of months. I think we already revealed that COVID-19 is most dangerous to people who have higher, hypertension and diabetes and morbidly obese. But those are still pretty general descriptions, right, guys?
Right.
Because you can get much
I
more.
heard
much
also
higher.
Black or brown folks and South Asian folks, people with darker skin. And there was this thing on Radiolab about vitamin D deficiency, although it seems like they're still researching it, but anecdotal evidence. I don't know if you heard that Radiolab or not. It's like, but there was a doctor in London who was saying, listen, they had all these Asian doctors in London who were dying at like 3 to 4 times the rate of the other medical staff. And so they had like a kind of emergency, like what is going on. And this is anecdotal, but then they started to take vitamin D supplements and the rate went down, at least for the London staff or like the UK medical staff. And I actually just checked it the other day and about vitamin D and whether there was anything behind that, and whether I, as an East Asian person, am more vulnerable. And it seems like, yes, I might be, because Koreans apparently have like a really big vitamin D deficiency, at least in Korea or whatever. But
yeah, I mean, so that a little bit about this is about genomics and genetics, but my question to you, Natalie, well, we've got the vitamin D question and the question about skin color, but how does genomics help us hone in on these? Because you said, it gives us a kind of more detailed, nuanced picture. How does genomics actually do that when we've made these observations, just clinical observations about hypertension, diabetes, et cetera?
Yeah, so what Christine just mentioned is actually something that is a group descriptive. By and large, on average, it seems that in Asian populations, there is an issue with vitamin D. But if we have the genetic sequencing for each and every person, we can actually identify the personal risk of that specific individual and not necessarily go by the group description. So it just may very well be that Christine specifically is not that much at risk,
right,
compared to other people, but judging by the current information, which is based on average population based findings, she still is considered at risk, because we don't know the personal proclivity or factors of each individual, and that is something that genomics can really help with.
So it may be that Christine is not that at risk, and it's just we're just lumping these huge groups together, and we can be a lot more specific and nuanced. We've got a new face to this conversation. We're talking about genomics and COVID and what is the role of genomics. We've heard how you can understand a lot more about, I guess, who exactly is at risk within a big group. We've talked about people with darker skins, Asian people, East Asian people being, as a large group, more at risk. But how do you find out which individuals are more at risk? Is there a big variance in that group? That's what we're talking about right now. And that's one thing. Is everyone following this so far?
Yeah.
Good.
It's really interesting.
Okay, good. Yeah, good. All right. So where do we want to go with this? I mean, are people aware of this, of the role that? I mean, Natalie, you seem to know more about it than everybody else. So, I mean, what is your knowledge base? Are you actually involved in COVID research yourself, or is it something that is kind of like a field that's close to you?
Not per se, but I am a director of a group of medical writers, and my group specializes in producing documents, scientific and regulatory documents that support submissions for digital health products. And so platforms that use genomic data and help take clinical decisions using that genetic data is something that we have previously looked at and worked at. So that's actually one of the perks that you get as a medical writer. You are exposed to a myriad of ideas, not necessarily working on them specifically, but you do get the exposure. So this is where the knowledge comes from.
I mean, can I just ask you, I was going off to a little bit to a side, but that's Talkaoke. A lot of what we've been talking about so far has been about this question of awareness. In the previous session, we talked about it quite a lot, and how to communicate this complexity to a wider public. Is that something that you have to do, or are you just communicating this to other scientists?
Yeah, we mainly do communicate to other scientists, but there is actually a specialization within medical writing to write documents which are layperson language, and they are they speak to an average audience, and that is an important part of it, because it recently has been required by the regulators that every medicinal product has also a leaflet which speaks to an average person. So there is an awareness around that, but yeah, but most of the communication is really to the scientific community and the regulators.
Okay, so you're actually you're like me in a way. I'm a facilitator, but you're facilitating the conversations from expert to expert, where I guess, got this wider group, and it's a real challenge sometimes at the Festival of Genomics when you've got all different interest groups, people that are just simply interested in the field that maybe know nothing about the complexities, or the going really deep into the science. But that's the task here, and in a way, I'm wondering, if this is part of the question, do people understand genomics as a whole and what genomics is outside of the genomics community? Well, maybe we can ask, is there anyone outside of the genomics community here in this Talkaoke, and do you understand what genomics is? No. Yeah, Katie, you do.
Yeah, I'm totally outside of it. My background is more in physics, and lately I'm more curious about philosophy. But like genomics in general is a very fascinating subject for me, because transhumanism is something I think about a lot, and it involves genomics in a fairly big way. But joining a little bit with the previous talk, we talked about how there seems to be a lot of kind of stigmatized thinking and feelings about genomics in general from people, and even knowing more about themselves. And I'm not sure, maybe Natalie can answer this question. I have read some articles about microbiome and its role in our well-being, and in how we experience everything, and how our body works. So if there is so much stigma about genomics, wouldn't digging into microbiome more be kind of a way to enter the genomics field, to make people more familiar with it in a way that is less prone to privacy issues and stigma as well? Because I would guess that they would have to be related fairly strongly.
Do people have a stigma about their microbiome?
I haven't come across any of it, even though I've raised this topic with a lot of people.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I just want to say, before anyone jumps in, there was a comment, I think I'm going to go from Maeve McMahon. Were patients asked to join the Festival of Genomics? And I think the answer is, well, I'll let Rebecca speak on that one, but it's a good question. And Maeve, you can see the Zoom link there. Come in and join in on this chat, because we need you as well. We need lots of different views. I don't know if you are a clinician yourself or a patient, but come in and have a chat with us. Okay, so where are we going to go with this conversation? Talking about the microbiome, we're talking about awareness of genomics, we're talking about lots of different things. It's up to you what part of that conversation you want to grasp, and that's all of you here. But Rebecca, you've turned yourself on, turned your camera on. So do you want to just answer that question about the patient involvement in the Festival of Genomics at large?
Yes, so I would ask that, Maeve, I really hope that is how you pronounce your name. If you check out Day 4, we have a lot of stuff from the NHS, from Health Education England, and also specifically a panel on patients' genomes and data storage with a patient called Stacey McPherson. But that is my information.
That's the informational part of the.
That is the informational part. No, I really like what Katie talked about the microbiome. And potentially like how that can interact with, what Natalie was saying before about how we're working as hard as we can with COVID and genomics and trying to get all this information out. But it'd be interesting to see if the microbiome could interact, because it's another layer, isn't it, of the system?
Yeah, I mean, if it wasn't complicated enough, we've now got this whole microbiome to deal with as well. Christine, Kieran, any of you two want to chip in at this point? You've not said anything yet. I just want to make sure that this is, first of all, this is making sense. Have you got an opinion on any of these on the microbiome?
I mean, I have read quite a lot about the microbiome, and actually, I would say it does get press. Depends what you're reading, but you will see small articles in the newspaper about it, referring to it. And but I read the book Gut mainly, which is quite good on that. And you know, she was talking about, you know, for instance, there's about 1,000 types of, or more maybe, of different bacteria in the gut, but we've only managed to isolate about 9, and then we've got a whole market of products. And when you take those products, you tend to end up with too much of one particular, you know, sort of probiotic in your gut, which is actually worse for you when they've done trials on it than not taking it. So, I mean, I can go into details, but there's no point really, because you can look up yourself really. But it was just something in the New Scientist showing that acidophilus doesn't help you recover from antibiotics. It actually worsens your chance of recovery than taking nothing. But I think what's interesting about this is that, you know, we're looking at vaccines and we're looking at a certain sort of, you know, let's say ideology about how you should save human health. And yet we are discovering basically that our microbiome is pretty destroyed by modern society and what we're doing. And that a lot of the health problems are coming from that. And you know, I wonder whether it's actually a different way of approaching health altogether. And it's quite scary, I think, because, you know, if we have to say, well, actually, we didn't need all these drugs, we just needed to work on this, or actually we fucked it, so we're always going to have drugs because we've destroyed it. Yeah. Probably the more likely.
Is that a scientific term?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
But I think it's a great area, and I think it does need more exploring, obviously.
Okay. I mean, in a way, it's kind of, is there a parallel between the microbiome? I believe it isn't. There's a omics where microbiomics and genomics, in terms of that we're just scratching the surface of this huge set of interactions that we really are only just beginning to understand how it works. Is there a parallel? What do people think? Natalie, you've got to help us out here, really. Have you ever written any papers on this particular, or written any? No.
No, I mean, the only thing I am aware of is there is I agree there's a lot more research going on in microbiome, and it has been connected to some clinically meaningful outcomes, because so far there's a body of knowledge being created, but not really clear how that relates to actual clinical outcomes. The one that I am aware of is, I think in the sphere of diet, there are some companies that use your specific personalized microbiome data to recommend certain types of diet, but that's pretty much the extent of my knowledge in that. So,
okay, so yeah, so we all kind of agree that it's important, but no one really knows what to do about it, except to do more research. You just posted a link there. Thank you, Katie, for that link. Do you want to explain a little bit more about it? Have you read it, or is it just something you've just found?
Well, I don't want to go into detail because I'm totally not the person to talk about the field in general. I'm just it just talks about connection between genomics and microbiome. and this was one of the reasons why I raised the question.
Yeah.
Because we spoke before that there is a stigma on genomics in general public who are unaware of the subject, especially, and if they are related in certain way, couldn't this be an easier entry point to get people aware of the genomics?
Yeah.
Through something that doesn't have any stigma around it yet.
Oh, I see. That's what you're saying. That microbiome.
Yeah, it was like
could be the pathway to genomics.
Yes, it's kind of an entry point, and to make you know you start talking about this, you find how it impacts your health, and then you can say, and it directly interacts with your DNA. That's why it's good to know what you've got.
Okay, so I get that's what you're saying. But has it also got a relationship with COVID? And this is maybe a question to some experts out there. That has microbiomics. Has there been any study about your microbiome and how is this kind of all this talk about different groups being more susceptible to COVID-19 or having worse symptoms? Anything to do with the microbiome? And has anyone done any research on it? Right now, I'm just combining different fields of science and asking questions.
Yes, someone has done.
Oh, okay. Look, here we go. There's the links are coming through in the chat. Rebecca?
Yeah, so someone has done research very recently saying how the gut microbiota composition reflects disease severity in patients with COVID-19, which is really interesting. I've not been able to read further. But so it is all these things that we just need to think of when think about COVID and how we treat people. I think the problem with, maybe not the problem, but an interesting thing that it's because we are all in this pandemic and we're all in COVID. I feel it's sort of easy to almost fall into two camps of going, it's all about all about the people and really focusing on like the individual people and going, it doesn't matter about the bigger research. We have to help this one person, which I entirely understand. And then but then it also feels a bit cold to go the other way and go, well, we don't understand. It's the microbiome, it's epigenetics, it's all these other things. So it's really getting that balance right and also being able to communicate that, because you don't want to scare people, but you also do want to make it very clear what we can and what we can't do and what we do and don't know.
Okay, so I mean, there's a question of scale there, talking about the individual and really empathizing with that individual. And then there's the huge picture as well. Christine, you've got a point.
Yeah, I think this is interesting. And I'm really into the microbiome as a total amateur, but I'm just quite into science and we do science communication also, mostly about climate and the environment in the Arctic. But I just happen to also be interested in the topic. But one of the things that sort of maybe links to the theme of the last Talkaoke, which I missed, is it's about trust. And because like we talk about the fact that it's hard to communicate genomics, and I had to look it up, like what's the difference between genetics and genomics, and for a normal person, not really much difference, really, honestly, but I mean, they're in the same neighborhood, so it's kind of okay to use genetics. But like, but I was thinking that with COVID, it's with the vaccination, for instance, it was kind of this breakthrough. It's like the first mRNA vaccines, not all of them, they're like 60 being developed, but some of them are these mRNA ones. We've actually almost never had such a quick vaccine process ever. There's not that many successful vaccines for viruses. But I've heard even in like families, people with like healthcare professionals in their place, that it wasn't just the mRNA, although there was that part of it. There's this suspicion that that because the industry is so kind of like closed and there's a lot of intellectual property, and let's face it, it's part of an extractivist capitalist system, that it's that they won't necessarily put the care of people in the front. And then there's like wild things, like some people are saying there's going to be like nanotechnology put into there. And I've heard this from actually like not totally gullible people. So I was a little bit worried. I was like, oh gosh, you really think that? And, you know, my sense is that we're nowhere near doing shit like that. But like, you know, I was like, okay, well, but on the other hand, in terms of what people do really know, in terms of the behavior that's out there and the things that are, whether it's from like, you know, the opioid crisis or from the fact that COVAX doesn't seem to be working very well in terms of getting like equitable distribution of the vaccine out. I thought I saw a number that was like 25 doses to developing countries, which can't be right, but maybe is right. And I was just like, oh no, that's terrible. And I mean, so I think that there's a trust issue because of the way that ultimately the system is supposed to be taking care of human health. There's this idea that we have the right to health, but the specialist world and the way in which information is actually considered asset in a commercial sort of healthcare sort of like industry, and it's not
does
just
that undermine the trust in a way, the attitude to intellectual property, especially in a crisis? It's a really good point, the point about trust, and I think it is something that really anyone can have an opinion on, whether they're inside the field of genomics or inside the field of pharma or not. Whether people think, is there a trust issue? How does the field of genomics and even more widely the field of medicine as a whole get that trust back? Because it is an issue, and part of the reason I think is Christine's already said is you mentioned a few different things about inequality, attitude to intellectual property. And I think you said something else, but anyway, there's quite a lot of reasons why you've given why people wouldn't trust these pharmaceutical companies or the institutions that are developing vaccines. And what do other people think about this? Is there a trust issue, and how do we deal with it?
I think there definitely is a trust issue, as sad as it is, though, because there's been a trust issue for forever. You know, since vaccines have come about, we've all heard of, you know, vaccines cause autism and you know, MMR and rubella and same one. So I think the importance is to make education and keep the message simple and clear, like, this is a vaccine, this is going to stop this. We want things to go back to normal, but also making it hi Kieran.
I just wanted to sort of raise it. I think that's part of the problem, to be honest, Rebecca, with all due respect, is that the debate is, no, the vaccine's good for you, don't be so stupid, of course they're good, end of. Anyone that thinks it's not is not going to, we're never going to be back to normal. So the people that are actually anti-vax don't really get a voice. And then people like me, who are very neutral on the whole fact and just want to know the facts and maybe see the debate, don't ever get a chance to hear what their fears are. We're told that they think it's aliens, but I know anti-vaxxers and they don't think it's aliens. They're worried about it affecting their immune system long term. And I can't see anywhere where I can find the answers to their queries. And I think
so you're actually trying to win them over. These are friends of yours that are anti-vaccine, but you don't necessarily have a kind of, you know, a response from the scientific community. There isn't this, as Rebecca said, very clear and simple response, but perhaps it's too clear and simple and not going into these details that people want to know.
Yeah, it's a little bit dumbed down, the response, to be honest.
Yeah.
We're not that stupid as the public. We can handle a little bit more science than that.
No, I think you're right. I think that also what I was more saying, keeping it simple, is just perhaps in relation to certain other messages we've been getting in terms of this situation. But no, I think you're right. Like, you can't just say, do this and have no scientific backing, or not have a debate. And yeah, there needs to be information, and I'm sure there is information out there for some of these questions about what is the effect of vaccine. We know it's 80-90% effective, but what does that mean?
Yeah.
We need to know. People talk about side effects. It's like, okay, well, what are the side effects? Let people know. It's sort of going back to that education thing, and you're right that you can't just dismiss half an argument, but I think there is an element of putting forward the right information or putting forward the information in the right way.
Yeah, so it's not just the simplicity or complexity, it's about how you put forward this information, how it's presented from simple to complex, I suppose. Just while we're talking about conspiracy theories, I'm going to ask, is there anybody out there? But what I'm talking about more is there anybody watching the Vimeo that wants to come and get involved in this debate? I think it's a really important one, just in terms of, this question of trust and like, how do you grow trust? How do you get this? How do we equip someone like Kieran with a little bit more material to have these conversations that he's having with people that are skeptical about vaccines? Katie, you had your hand up.
I just wanted to share on the topic of trust. There is a Harvard professor, Avi Loeb, going around this year giving interviews and strongly pushing on this subject. And he has, I very strongly agree with his explanation why we have this lack of trust.
Yeah.
And he says that in many areas, public is very curious about answers to certain subjects. In that case was extraterrestrials. And he said, or in this case, you can take, people are curious about what effect it'll have on their immune system.
Yeah.
And scientists who, from his point of view, are essentially also public servants through the whole chain of how they get funded, he said the scientists should respond to the public's question and concerns and try to answer those questions instead of just stating, your answer is what is wrong, or it's stupid, or you shouldn't even ask it. So I think this fact is the reason why the issue of trust over the years has become such a big problem. Because I think if we go back, let's say 50, 70 years, scientists didn't care much about anyone's views on the subject, so long as they were curious and they did the research in it. Whereas nowadays, doing research on certain topics will not work because you will not get funding and all of the other issues. So the public wants answers and we can't get it.
There's a whole can of worms there. Are scientists public servants? We've got a point in the chat here. I think is it Lemuel? I'm sure I've got that wrong. But he says, speaking of trust, how do we safeguard politicizing genomics? For example, through media outlets. I think that point needs a bit more explanation, to me at least. So come on, join on the Zoom. The link should just be down there underneath the Vimeo, and let's hear what you've got to say. Anyone want to respond to Katie's point? Have we got the frame wrong when it comes to the interaction between science and the curious people that are not scientists? That's you guys, really. Not necessarily scientists, but those curious people. Are we entertaining their curiosity in the right way? Christine?
I mean, I work a lot with scientists on climate, and I would say that, well, almost all the scientists that we work with want to be public servants, and that's like one of their base motivations. I mean, besides just having a job, a well-paid job. I would say that, there are different kinds of research institutes, and but even within, say, publicly financed research institutes, there is such a big crossover with commercial interests.
Yeah.
And you see this much more in universities in general, I would say, is that it's like a pipeline for for industry, and almost like a publicly subsidized pipeline for industry, but a very, and I would say that there are, I don't know, the evidence for, and people's questions, it's not only, I think, that they don't get answered just because scientists don't bother to answer them. And I think there are like a few forums, not enough, definitely forums where people can actually talk about this in a respectful and way, where there's questions are taken seriously. But I also think that it's, again, I would say that there's so much money to be made that, of course, like given the way things are, like the way that things are now, it's like you'd be kind of crazy just to trust, really. And I know, and it's like I don't think AstraZeneca or like whatever, I don't think they're trying to kill people, or Pfizer or all these people. And I would get the vaccine. I registered for the vaccine. My parents just got the vaccine, the first shot, and I was really glad for that. It's not about that per se, but I would say that anyone who's like has any eye at all on these things would not only be aware of a lot of stuff that we don't know. And in fact, there is a lot of stuff they don't know what the effect is for vaccines, for instance, on pregnant women or other things. And that's a true thing. Like,
so in a way, you're saying people are right to be skeptical when there's so much at stake. But are they? My question is, are they skeptical in the right way? Is it the right kind of skepticism?
I would say it this way, that those scientists may want to be public servants, and some of them are. Many of them are not. Many of them are not necessarily serving the public interest as their first priority. It's maybe there in a cascade of priorities, but the first priority is going to shareholders, it's going to the people who own the intellectual property. And the fact that there is like that we should be cautious there and mindful there, that just seems smart, because if you don't have to look just at genomics or healthcare in general. I mean, you just look all over the place. So it's worth really thinking about. I mean, ideally, what we would really want is that scientists are public servants and that they work together in a way, because we probably like we have seen what they can do now, what we can do now with all, like when we actually pull together and they shut down a perfume factory and they start creating antibac and all these things. It was fantastic. It was this sudden feeling of like, oh my gosh, we have superpowers in this in a system we thought could never change. And then suddenly it changed. Overnight, we were flying. So it's like
there's too many points now, for Christine, for me to deal with it. They're all good points, don't get me wrong, but we need to one at a time. Our scientists, public servants,
not yet.
Not yet. And what about public servants themselves? Or do we trust those other public servants? Anyway, Katie, you've had your hand up for ages. I know, Kieran, you also wanted to jump in. So let me come to Katie first, and then to you, Kieran, and then hopefully people watching on the Vimeo, just join in or put it in the chat, because we need your opinion on this as well. Can
you put the Vimeo link on the chat here? Because I want
the Vimeo link. I will send you the Rick. Can you just put the Vimeo link in the chat, please? I will get Rick to do it. He's doing the amazing visuals behind as well. Katie.
Thank you. Just on the trust issues, someone don't want to mistake, but someone raised the point of the way that the research is being funded as well. So could it be that the trust issues run a little bit deeper than just, do we trust the scientists? But I think people are aware that there will be many companies with a strong financial interest to fund the research into whether the vaccine works. But I don't think there will be many companies that will find a financial incentive in finding that vaccines have certain dangers. Like, it doesn't profit anyone per se. So it could be that the public has lack of trust because there's a lot of research on one side, but very, very tiny fraction on the other side. And if that's the case, and the reason is more structural, then is it that through the structural change we can change the trust issue? Let's say if government would see the people concerned on the subject, they could say, okay, here is a grant to do research on this subject so we can answer the question once and for all and close the discussion. But
okay.
I haven't observed or noticed any of such things happening in any country.
Doesn't the government ask anyone developing any medical product to actually do research on the dangers of that product?
They do ask, but there is no incentive to find the dangers, but there is incentive to find it being effective.
Okay, so it's more about incentivizing the problems rather than the solutions.
Yes, but government could easily fund, like, you know, the society gets impacted negatively if people don't get vaccinated, so government could like reason that there is a financial incentive to do research in this area. And that could answer the questions, and then people wouldn't have that trust issue because, well, my question got answered.
Okay, so all right, okay. There's a question here in the chat. Is this video going to be publicly accessible? I'm not sure, actually. It probably will be. I think
yes, it will be afterwards.
Will be. Okay. And
just give me a little while.
Yeah, and we're just going to get that link for you to find out the Vimeo link. We'll put that in the chat as well if you want other people to join and watch this. Kieran, it looked like you had a point. Is it still there? You have to unmute yourself.
Vaguely. I mean, I think I was just going to add to Christine's list, really.
Yeah.
But I think the other problem that I suppose I perceive this, but I know they do as well.
Yeah.
Again, the anti-vaxxers, is that there is a thing about being forced to have the vaccine, and certainly professions are making sure you do. Certainly companies are saying you have to in their contract. And I think that politicized, I don't know what you want to call that, but when you're forced to do something and the anti-vaxxers already think there's a conspiracy going on, and then suddenly they're going to lose their jobs if they don't do it, it only adds to the fear around a vaccine and actually probably is counterproductive. And I think that it's really, really important that medicine isn't politicized like that, and it shouldldn't be compulsory. You have to win people over.
Who is politicizing the medicine in this case? Is it the scientists, or is it the politicians?
I mean, on this occasion, I think it's the politicians, and I don't think it really helps that Boris Johnson tells us that this COVID is more deadly. I mean, you don't want that delivered by someone like him, who's frankly comes across as quite idiotic. You want that delivered by someone scientific that you trust. So, you know, it's partly who's delivering it and the government that's delivering it.
Yeah. Okay, so we've heard there's a kind of like real nexus of distrust growing here. It's not only about the money and the intellectual property and the way that funding is tied to research, but it's also the way that research is politicized and medicine is politicized. It leads to this sense of distrust, and this is a challenge because the people here in this session are not professionals in the field, but this is a challenge that's going out to professionals in the genomics field. And do you care about this? We don't know because we've not heard from you. But is this mistrust that's kind of brewing in society for all of these reasons something that can be overcome? Is it something that's a problem for genomics? If you've got a comment, please do either put it into the chat that you can see on your screen, or put it or come and join us on this Vimeo. We really, really want to hear from everyone on this one, because I think it's a really important question, I think, and it probably even goes further than vaccines or genomics. It's about who we trust in society, which is a big thing. I mean, you were talking, Christine, as well about climate change. I mean, maybe if we heard what the problems were in terms of the kind of connections in your field in terms of communicating the science of climate change, maybe that could also give us some insight into what the pitfalls are when it comes to genomics.
I agree with Kate. How do you pronounce your name?
Kieran.
Kieran, that I think that agency is really important. That like things in terms of like what I know as a communicator, and more what we're doing is kind of holding space for conversation rather than try to do the like classical one-way messaging. And I think that the idea that people are listened to, that they get responses, and also that they have agency. So the idea, at the same time, it's really, I see that we are in a like a global pandemic, a health crisis. I don't believe it will be the last, unfortunately. And I think, having read George Monbiot's latest thing on long COVID, I think that this is going to be around actually for a long time. We're going to be sort of grappling with this for a long time. And so we really need to put a lot of energy in creating spaces on a number of different levels. And that's both sort of within sort of what, I don't know, I call it the medical industrial complex or something, but also, you know, in professions where people are maybe forced to get vaccinated, at all the different levels, there needs to be some conversation about risk, and about how to deal with the unknown, and how to deal with one another when we're not going to agree, and yet everything that we do is interconnected. So if we can I
just ask, why are we not going to agree? What is the thing you think that will fundamentally stop that sense of consensus when it comes to dealing with COVID?
I think that we're not going to agree because, I mean, my gut instinct when you said that was inequality and what some people call the Matrix of Domination. There is a very unequal distribution of agency in the world. And those people who live, you know, at the bottom of this matrix, they know it in everything that they do. And most of us are probably not in there. So I'm not saying that from the first person, but I also have done a lot of work on political violence and working with marginalized communities. And I would say that the reason that we can't agree is because you can see that we're polarized. The politics everywhere is polarized. And
so you're saying this inequality, political inequality, marginalization actually does have an effect on how we view healthcare, how we view how to deal with COVID and all of these things. There's a direct effect.
Well, these power inequalities are what I like this term Matrix of Domination. Is it's what you would consider if you were like a natural scientist who's doing biology, you know, and looking at say plants or fungus or something. You have to start with the bedrock. You have to start with the topography and the bedrock. What are the water catchments? What is your soil composed of? Like all these really basic things. And bedrock is often invisible, but it's there. It's the structure of the relationship. So if we're like in a relational web, like a dynamic, self-regulating relational web, very, very much similar and sort of like on top of kind of like the epigenetics of biology, is that we have this social sort of like web that goes on top of it, but it's very much based on the power dynamics. So insofar as like we live within a matrix of domination, this will always create a kind of like spectrum of what would say intention, and because some intentions are going to be very different than, so the 1% or the 0.1 top percent of people, I would say their interests are not necessarily so much in line with especially the bottom 50%.
Okay, so and I guess that would lead to a distrust in institutions per se.
That leads to, I mean, this is where we are. This is I think where we are.
That's where we are. That's where we are right now. Okay. Thanks for that. So we, in a way, it's an unexpected direction when we're talking about genomics and COVID. Actually, now what we're talking about is really the structure of society and how that actually affects not just our health, but our perceptions of what to do about our health as well. So where do we want to take this conversation? Do we agree with Christine's analysis?
I just wanted to sort of say about what Christine was saying. I think you've also got the factor that this doesn't really, it appears, affect young people at the moment as much as other people. And there's a part of being a teenager, certainly when I was a teenager, where I try and use some nice language here rather than bad language, but where you just want to get one over on the adults, and actually you hate them, and you might be even kind of quite destructive and a lot of music expresses that kind of thing. And I think in some ways, like you see the riots going on in Holland at the moment, it's mainly teenagers apparently who are kind of just, maybe they're just not on board with this project in the same way, and that is born out of disenfranchisement and feeling kind of voiceless. Then in the end, you don't want to be part of it. You want to destroy it. So we want them to take the vaccine and be good and stay at home, but we haven't really worked very hard over the years to have their cooperation. We've excluded a lot of them. So why do we expect that from them?
All right, Katie, it looks like you want to come in there.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. It's like, you have never listened to us, why should we listen to you kind of situation. Yeah. It sounds very, very like obvious when you talk about it, but then again, the whole structure is essentially the reason for the mistrust. So when we have this situation and we need to sort it out sooner than we can sort out the structural issues, what's the way forward?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we've gone a long way from genomics, but that's kind of fine because this is Talkaoke. We can go wherever we want to go with this. I
don't think it's so far, because with genomics, we agreed that trust and understanding of it is one of the problems. And I think this point directly relates to that.
Yeah.
Genomics from the perspective of that top 1% will look very different, and the value of it compared to those at the bottom. Like those at the top will be like, yeah, it's great, you can make society better. Those at the bottom will be, well, what if it's harder to find a partner for me? So like the issues, their points of view are very, very different. And I think one of the problems for the trust is that some people often don't see the other perspective as well, and don't put the effort in understanding it. Like it's like forcing people to have vaccine. It's pushing something down the throat instead of understanding the reasons and trying to find a compromise that, understand these reasons. Let us do this thing to like alleviate those reasons, and you take the vaccine because then you'll be a participant and it'll be better for everyone and for you as well.
But I mean, I don't know. It just seems like such a huge kind of social effort to do that.
Yes, but I think even the UK government touched on the subject in regards to COVID very recently, because I was reading an article that they were considering paying £500 to incentivize people when they get a positive result to stay at home. But and here's like one of the ideas that, I think the reason why they need those £500 is because they think that no one understands their experience and what they have to go through for them to stay at home, because it's much harder than for those people in the top who are saying that, it'll be better for the society.
Yeah.
I was going to say that I just really like all the points you're making, and it's interesting because I actually, when I first heard that £500 idea, a part of me was a bit cynical. But then it's my job. I can work from home. Is that a cynical counter?
No, that's just the cash register.
Yeah. But I'm in a position where I can work from home, and that you have to acknowledge that it's difficult for people and to make it easier for them, and not just put it on, oh, it's for the greater good. And it's like, that's not how it works, unfortunately. You have to like acknowledge these differences and do something to change it.
Okay, so are we acknowledging the differences between people? Christine, did you want to jump in there?
I just was curious because I'm thinking that maybe Rebecca or someone else knows, but like, it's a little bit of a pivot, a geeky question about mRNA and these vaccines. And like, I mean, I know kind of what's written in the popular articles about it, but like, can somebody say more about that and how, like, what's good about it? What's maybe risky about it? I thought it was like, from a science point of view, I was really excited. I was like, oh, wow, I can't believe they can do that now. You know, like octopus and cephalopods are supposed to be able to mess with their mRNA and their transcriptase and stuff like that. And I always thought that was like incredible. And now I guess, although we don't do it internally, like we're starting to do that. We're starting to do that, at least with this vaccine, it looks like. So does anyone know anything about that? It feels kind of new.
I'm going to pass it over to Rebecca, but I'm not sure. You're our best hope here, Rebecca, on that one. How does this work, this mRNA vaccine? Any ideas? Oh, she's gone. People out there. So it's just going to be another one of those things where Casey's just going to Google some stuff and put it in the, none of us actually really know, to be honest. But, you know, I guess that's a far cry away, that excitement about science and this or the possibilities, which certainly exists in genomics, but does it exist in the question, we've kind of failed to get excited when it comes to the science of vaccines, especially especially COVID, and maybe it's because it's too big and there and present. But I mean, I think that's a really interesting point. The 2 points. One is to find out more about the mRNA vaccine, but also the excitement and the science about it. What's going on there? We'd love to know. So we'd love someone to tell us. It might be Rebecca. That's our only hope. She is. What did she say? She was a molecular geneticist. So hopefully, or was a molecular geneticist. So hopefully she can tell us a little bit about that. Apart from that, we just have to carry on the conversation between.
Can I throw in another ball on the court?
Yeah.
How about, like, just before everyone sort of popped in, we were talking about speculative fiction, and I was talking about like Madeleine L'Engle's Wind Through the Door. But then as it was like shifting over, I was also thinking of Margaret Atwood's Oryx and Crake trilogy. I don't know if anyone has read that, but it's a pretty dystopic look at the future, and a lot of it is to do with genetics and actually the healthcare industry, and so, but you kind of get the picture. Like if you just look at any Atwood book story, and you kind of start to get the like.
They're all a little bit dystopian, aren't they?
And is COVID bringing us closer to like a kind of a place where like a lot of the polarity and the splitting and the mistrust, are we going into total breakdown?
Yeah, I mean,
or is there another sort of like spiral that is going to happen here, or sort of speculate a little bit, because things are pretty rough and unstable. I'll say that from the climate environment.
To use a climate metaphor, are we at the tip of the iceberg when it comes to this sense of mistrust and paranoia and all of these things that you just mentioned? And is COVID the beginning of a dystopian era, not the end of one? Katie?
I think that's a very great question, and I guess we'll all find out how it ends, but my personal view would be that one of the reasons, one of the things that gives me hope that we will not end up in some kind of dystopian future is those skeptics that we have. It's kind of a steering mechanism that protects us away from those dystopia, because, you know, whether that idea of chip vaccines was true or not, in either way, it made people have a look at it, even those who didn't believe it or who even didn't think about it. And even going forward, people will be more aware of it. You know, maybe it's not possible today, but in 50 years, who knows? But people who have gone through this experience, they may be more aware of it, and thus steer away from those dystopian futures that none of us want to experience. But there is another point which I think I have disagreed with some people about. What's the difference between this? Like, one person's dystopia could be another person's utopia.
Yeah.
so how to deal with that? Because we all end up living in the same world.
Unless we live in our own private utopias. We've got a new face here. You're down there as Asnad Link. Have you got a preferred moniker?
Well, sure. My name's Adam Zaretsky.
Adam, yeah.
Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, we can hear you very well, actually.
All right. So I'm calling in from Portugal, from a place called Cultivamus Cultura, which is run by a bunch of bioartists, including Marta Menezes. And I'm a bioartist. I do art and biology. I actually have a doctorate in art and biology. What the fuck? Anyway, so and I'm kind of interested in the conversation. I think Christine brought me in. I know her and Valentine from way up in Norway and in upstate New York too, in New Jersey. And so I'm just coming in to join the conversation.
Okay, well, Phil, you're very welcome. I'm just going to give you a round of applause. I just hit the wrong button just then, so apologies for that. I'll just throw you in where we've got to so far. We started off talking about COVID and genomics, and how genomics the science of genomics has informed treatment of COVID, but very quickly we moved on to this question of the public's first of all understanding, but then trust in, let's say, the wider COVID strategy, of vaccination, and, have their fears and their suspicions been alleviated, because there's a lot of people with a lot of different ideas about, the kind of, what it's all about, and why is there so much distrust?
I mean, I feel like I'm in a really bad 1980s B movie, some kind of dystopian sci-fi, and everybody's wearing these masks, and everybody's like sort of getting dressed up to go out, getting their self ready for just about anything. Yeah. And we're sort of stuck between Pfizer and AstraZeneca and pangolins. Like, is somebody eating a pangolin or putting a pangolin in their butt? And what does this have to do with, like, should we panic or should we just rave to death? Or, and then, it just seems like we're all stuck in some kind of.
Yeah, well, and funny enough, Adam, that is exactly where we got to. We kind of got to this point about, because we started talking about why the people are so distrustful of the science, and then we started talking about big corporations. We started talking about owning of intellectual property, about the inequality in society as a whole, and there's a lot of reasons for distrust, which kind of form this kind of, in some people's eyes, toxic brew of suspicion. And then we started talking about dystopian sci-fi stories, be they
right in there. This is fantastic.
And that's where we are right now. Is that we're kind of like
pink beard. This is fabulous.
Yeah. Is it? And with your pink beards, are some people's dystopias other people's utopias? Is where the point where you just joined us. That's where we are right now. Hopefully that's a fair summary of the journey of the conversation. I probably missed a lot of things out. But yeah, are we in a dystopian? It's a good point, Adam, and right on time. Are we in a dystopian moment? Is it going to get more dystopian?
Well, I mean, I'm really badly negative. I'm super dystopian, but I actually do enjoy a little bit of a challenge of life, that it's not all about Hallmark cards. I would say a couple things. I have a funny feeling we may find out that this virus was a gain of function accident that was funded globally by mistake or outsourced as a kind of neo-colonialist thing where you outsource the dangerous biotech to China so you can blame them later and they get the credit for the vaccine or something like this. But like, on the other hand, whether the virus is organic or created in a lab, it's not after us. It's not hateful or vengeant. In other words, a virus is just lands in our lungs and is like, ooh, our lungs are warm and they're delicious, right? So it's not personal. I think a lot of people feel under the gun.
They're taking it personally.
Yeah, but taking the virus personally now, how it's utilized and how it plays into the hands of big power, yes, I would agree that it's definitely, if people can take advantage of it, they'll keep the poor poor. And I think everyone's under the gun now to work harder under duress, without hazard pay, and or try to stay at home as much as possible. And it's rough. It's not a forced hermitage is not a mistaken way of reading this, but like we have orifices, like big holes in our bodies, and we're interorificial, and nothing really will stop that. Not these glasses, not this gas mask, right? Everyone knows that the farts, it doesn't matter how much gas mask you wear, if you're farting, you're spreading, you're a super spreader. We're in some kind of...
I know this is off topic a little bit, but are you saying that a fart can get through a gas mask?
I'm not saying that per se, but I think a fart can maybe get... you know, I mean, you can only wear your gas mask so long, and then there's farts. There's contagion and there's cures, and we're sort of stuck in between that. But there's also containment and contact, and I think that we're stuck between that too. We want to touch each other, and someone came up to me and hugged me with their butt today, like butt to butt. So not to contaminate me, we did like a butt hug, you know.
All right. So, I mean, will butt-to-butt hugging be the norm in the future? And will we
should have been the norm already.
When we look at videos of the past where people are hugging face-to-face, when from now on we're going to do it butt-to-butt or bum-to-bum, as we would say in the UK.
Very possible. I mean, one thing that I would really want to throw down is that it also comes down to some of the public's mistrust, I think, comes from ultimately huge amounts of complexity that they're supposed to sort of like fathom. And some of this has to do with genomics. I mean, genomics is not really about circuitry. It's not really about bioinformatics. It's not really about computer programs that are built into our bodies. Our bodies are not computer programs. They're not circuits. It's more like the original, like maybe a language, maybe poetry. Our genomes are poetry. They're deeply fragmented, crazy poetry. So they're closest to William S. Burroughs' kind of cut up text. We have mad, wild, cut up poetry that defines where our fingers grow from and what kind of, you know, hair male pattern balding there is in the world. These are all like not pre-programmed circuits, but actually like live living poetry. And that's why the fear, I think, of being influenced by something minuscule, invisible, that can change not just our behavior, change our lifespan, maybe even change our genome, right? That's what viruses do, is frightening because it sounds like it's changing our program or our circuit, but actually it's just more poetry.
I mean, this actually fits into some of the conversations you've already had today, that your genome is not a program, and it can come out in lots of different ways, depending on lots of different things. But yeah, I mean, I think this idea of the genome as a kind of, and it's an epic poem, being however many, some scientists going to tell me how long the genome is, but it's a quite long poem. But this idea of that as a poetry that you've got to sort of interpret through multiple readings is a really nice metaphor. If it's even a metaphor, maybe it's just an observation rather than a metaphor. but that's a really interesting kind of take on things. We've got a new participant here, David. Hello. At the moment, we're kind of talking about this. Oh, are we heading towards a dystopian future? Is it going to be like one of these dystopian works of fiction, but a biological dystopia? That's what we're talking about right now. The main reason, I'm just going to throw you in because we've just got here. We started talking about public distrust and conspiracy theories, and how we're not, the grounds for that distrust are much wider actually than science itself. It's about the power imbalance, I think you said, didn't you, Christine, or something like that. It's about inequalities in wealth and inequalities in power actually leading to people being distrustful of the man, let's say, for want of a better words. And yeah, so then we started talking about, is this the tip of the iceberg when it comes to disregarding science and mistrusting the motives of scientific institutions and pharmaceutical institutions? Are we just at the beginning? And that's where we've sort of been talking about this kind of, this kind of genomic dystopia, for a better word. And that's where we are right now. And it's a dystopia of paranoia and mistrust more than anything else, rather than the paranoia of the effects of genomics. That's where we are right now. Is that a fair summary?
That's fair.
Yeah. Okay.
That's really interesting. I mean, what I think is really interesting is I always think it's how interesting how little we understand about what the even just what the consequences of mutations are, for example. Like so for example, like in COVID-19, we've got these strains with different mutations, and it seems like this one that came from the fair county of Kent it looks like it might be spreading faster, but we still don't really understand why that is. And even then, that's even not completely clear, because there's been a bit of doubt as to whether it's still continuing to spread or it's spreading in the same way in different places. So there's a massive interaction between that mutation and maybe the circumstances in which that virus is spreading, if you see what I mean. So this is like a really, we know the entire genome. It's only got a certain, I don't know how many genes it's got, but it's like a handful of genes, and we know a lot about them. And we're looking at strains where we're just seeing very small mutations, and we're just trying to understand what that is. And I think actually, even though it's a tragic event for the entire world, and it's been terrible for obviously people that have lost people, they've got long COVID, it's been a terrible thing. But from a scientific point of view, I think it's kind of really highlighted biological sciences in the way that's never been before. It's promoted the research, in-depth research, that in some respects that's been never in a kind of scale and speed that's never been seen before. I think it's kind of really interesting, but it kind of at the same time it shows the power of science, but also at the same time shows how little we know.
Okay, so there's power, but there's also a lot of lack of knowledge there as well. Kieran, you had a point at the top there?
I think just to add to Dave's thing, I think also what we've learned, and Christine was saying earlier that this is a pandemic, but it's not going to be the first one, that our response to it as a world, as individuals, it's been very different from what everyone expected. I.e., have we got good protocols in place for government to respond to an epidemic that's worse than this, something much more deadly? Well, now we know roughly where the faults are, but also human behavior. Everyone expected everyone to sort of like riot and kill each other and snatch things, and actually that's not what's happened.
Yeah.
We're actually really nice and cooperative and easy, and and all the horror films that have been written about this kind of thing sort of look a bit lame now. So
well, maybe the cannibalism hasn't kicked in just yet, Kieran, but that might be coming. That's what we're talking about right now. Or are people nicer than in the dystopian novels?
That's excellent. It's kind of a bummer for the Armageddonists. We're actually nice people. Yeah. Oh no.
Yeah.
I do think that there's a lot to be said for personal protection getting revamped. I bought this sort of vacuum cleaner and just took the end off of it. And I just tend to walk around town. Like I turn it on and let it blow in my face.
Yeah.
Ah, fresh air. And it's sucking air from everywhere and putting it through this sort of HEPA filter here. And I get to have fresh air, but nobody else gets my fresh air. And I'm like guarding it.
Yeah.
Jealousy.
So you point that in the direction of.
Incredible. I mean, it feels good to sort of move around with this and feel safe with my baby.
Yeah.
I think I saw that in one of those Air Mall catalogs.
You think about everyone walking around with vacuums stuck to their head, like.
Have you got any plans to market this, Adam? This effective.
Well, I'm thinking of working with Bosch. I'm advertising for them now. I'm saying, Bosch, throw me a line. This is not just a vacuum anymore. Right? Okay.
Could that be could that be something that could be marketed? Where do we want to go with this conversation? The whole point of Talkaoke is up to you. Do we want to talk about dystopia? Do we want to talk about, are we willing? We talked a lot about science communication, but who, apart from David down there, is willing to communicate science's lack of knowledge? We'd always want to talk about science knowledge, but do we ever communicate our lack of understanding?
Can I put something in there quickly?
Yeah,
Sorry. What I think that's come through from this pandemic is really interesting is that there's a tension between public health and scientific research, because public health has to do things that help the public as large, and it almost like has to have blanket statements. It has to have clear rules. It has to have, this is how it's going to be. And at the same time, there's this scientific discourse about stuff we don't understand, and we're debating about it all the time. And then that, in some ways, is great, but it also makes the public health people's life much harder, because there's all this discussion about, is this actually the right thing to do? Is that the right thing to do? And then the public health people start saying, they fall into traps, and they start saying, oh no, don't, they try and suppress this discussion. But actually, we shouldn't suppress discussion. We should keep discussion going, but at the same time recognize that public health has a slightly different angle. At the same time, public health wants to borrow that kind of borrow that authority of science and say, this is the science. Yeah. But public health isn't the science. Public health is like what we've all decided to do as a collective, based on something that we know for now, and we're just going to have to stick with that, even if it's not completely backed up by science. We're just going to do this, and at the same time, we've got this science discourse going on. So I think there's all these clashes that come up.
So there's a little bit we're a bit at odds there from the science love to chat about things, as do people on Talkaoke, but you're saying public health needs to come up with a clear and definite message, which in a way is sort of goes against the scientific way of doing things.
Yeah, and it's like, that's why countries, maybe countries like China and, other countries like Vietnam are actually much better at doing the public health, because they don't worry about that. They say, like, this is how it's going to be, and this is what we're going to do. And, that's people saying, well, yeah, but, I'm not sure if I really want to wear a mask or whatever.
This is strange, because I want to just add to this. We're not being told how the virus lives in the world, like the ethology of the virus. And for instance, if you want to kill the virus in your mouth, should you have a glass of milk or a glass of lemonade or orange juice, right? Like, does it prefer, what's its least preferred pH? We don't know who the virus is, and there's only one way out, it seems, and that's by injecting, an mRNA vaccine. There are some live weakened vaccines out there, and there are some sort of traditional vaccines, but what's being promoted is a vaccine that's based on nanoparticles of lipofection agents with live messenger RNA in them, which it might be good because it probably doesn't cause cancer in your genome, because it doesn't insert into your genome, so it won't actually fuck you up like most gene therapy. But it also, is not used very often and not hugely successful yet. It's sort of like a.
So what are you saying, Adam? Are you saying that that complexity isn't being communicated when people are asked to take this virus, or what is the issue with the mRNA
Well, I mean,
vaccine?
I'm looking also for actually more complexity, but for the public, they might want to know 10 other ways that they can avoid the virus besides masks and getting their vaccine. You know, like nobody's got a fart mask or a fart collector, but also like, should we cover ourselves in butter? You know,
Yeah.
would that help? Or should we, you know, should we try powdered sugar? Does the virus?
You could do the
it's not a
research,
bacteria.
Adam, if you wanted to.
You know, there's
I
like
think.
lots
Yeah.
of different ways that you could. I'm talking also about herbal compounds that might help. You know, so-called natural science, like, but that actually works. That most pharmaceuticals
what
come
I'm
from.
going to do is I'm going to sort of paraphrase this. Is like, instead of just focusing on one idea, as David has said as well, public health has to do. What about the panoply of different, using the human imagination really wider than the fields of really
I can even give like a real biotech example. I do these labs on methods of transgenesis, and it includes like how to do it yourself, micro-inject, particle bombard, like nanoparticle bombard, like biolistics, how to do electroporation at home. And my lipofection lab is a massage lab. We make a lipofection agent using cocoa butter and some things that make it slightly caustic that turn it into a kind of harsh soap. We do some roughing up of the skin. We mix some DNA with that and we use it for a sort of hard massage, like a shiatsu kind of, try and get the DNA using lipofection. Most people don't know what lipofection is.
I don't know what, you're going to have to explain.
Lipid is fat and fection is infection. It's a fat infection. And what it took was many, many years of trying to get genes into the center of cells. Scientists figured out that you could just use sort of like a harsh, soapy cocoa butter, and it would soak into your cells all the way into the nucleus and then insert the DNA into your genome. And what it turns out is that now we're taking nanoparticles of lipofection agent with the mRNA inside of it and injecting it intramuscularly into our bodies. But there's a chance that if you would just like self-flagellate a little or rough up your skin and take the vaccine and sort of rub it on, it might be fine. You might not need an injection. You know, so lipofection can be topical. And people don't understand lipofection means massaging your body with infectious fat.
Well, it's a topical conversation right now, that's for sure. Sorry.
I think if you had lipofection,
Go on, Dave.
I've just got a quick one. If you had it via the skin, you'd have to have a much higher dose to get into the. So you probably wouldn't. It'd be too. The cost would be too much. That's my.
But one big lipofection orgy live on like some X-rated YouTube show would really help the cause of the vaccine. Where it's
is
like,
that for the over 80s only?
You know what I mean? Like demystify it a little bit, because people don't understand what they're getting put in their bodies, and then they're a little scared. So I'm like, make it into something.
Okay.
What are you putting in yourself?
I tend to just use random DNA. You know, I have really messy hybrid DNA isolation labs, and we just throw cucumbers and raw meat and cat spit and all sorts of stuff and isolate the DNA and just see what gets in. But it's not vectorized. It's kind of hit or miss.
I just want to take this opportunity to publicize Rick, who's doing our backgrounds at the moment. And normally in something like this, you know, it's, when you're doing a very expert kind of conversation, it's hard to visualize. But I think a bunch of over 80s having a kind of fat vaccine orgy is probably an easy one to visualize. I don't know, Rick. But that might be it might be a bit more easy than the normal kind of, you know, chemicals and molecules and cell organelles. But anyway, that's Rick doing the backgrounds, and I guess Adam's doing his own backgrounds. Where are we going to go with this conversation? Do we want to talk about the role of art or creativity and imagination in addressing this COVID crisis, be it in terms of the kind of art that you're doing, Adam, which is very much biological, or other forms of art? That would be a kind of interesting take, I think. And can that kind of art inform the science? That could be one way. It's up to you where you want to take this conversation. That's just my suggestion of, you know, what Adam's been talking about. But anyone got any direction they would like to take this conversation. I've just been so enthralled by this. I've not been checking the chat. Oh, we had a technical glitch. That's the only chat thing to update there. That's been fixed. So that's kind of old news. Where do you want to take the conversation, people? Where do you want to go with this?
I say something that I think that,
yeah,
in terms of like mediums of persuasion, art in general, art is much stronger than science.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And although I think what the government is trying at the moment is like a big dose of fear, you know.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's also a kind of art form, I suppose, and how you put across the fear. Because I think there is a lot of, you know when things are going bad, and then you have these special report. You know, there was a bit where they stopped filming in hospitals. I don't know if you noticed that. There was a bit where they stopped filming in hospitals, and then like the cases started going up. So then they started filming in hospitals, and you start getting a few pictures of people like gasping for breath or whatever, dying with their loved ones or not with their loved ones. And that has a much bigger impact on people than just seeing numbers in their region and all that kind of stuff.
So, I mean, in a way, you're talking about the mechanics of fear and how the government is using fear, but in a way using it to stop people from dying. I mean, let's be frank about this.
Yeah, I'm saying that presenting someone with scientific information is not particularly a good way of making them change what they do, change their behaviors. Even if it's that scientific information is the chances of dying have gone up by 25% and the number of people around you dying has gone up. That's still not quite the same as showing an image of someone actually dying. Do you know what I mean?
Okay, so you're saying it's kind of justified from the government to use these.
I'm not really discussing whether it's justified or not, but that's
what they're doing, and they're doing it because it's effective.
That kind of stuff is effective compared to science. I'm not really making an ethical call on it. I mean, there is a lot of ethical questions about it, but
it would be an interesting time as a sort of governmental aid to, promote isolation technology and community at the same time, to have sort of mass meetings of people that are all in their own safety bubbles, interacting, like there's sort of these Zorb balls, maybe to get like 1,000 people in Zorb balls. I think there was a concert, the Flaming Lips had a concert where everybody was in Zorb balls. I mean, to have sort of clean air piped into segmented areas in a park so that like people could socially isolate with each other might be more helpful than just stay at home, which is pretty much impossible for a lot of people.
Do you feel the messaging is too negative there, Adam?
Well, I just think that we also, everybody needs something more than preventativeness. If you're looking for something from government, it's not just a stopgap measure. You're looking for a chance to see what people can do together. Now, I have to say, I don't know if the vaccine was engineered. I'm not one of those super conspiracy theorists, but I happen to know that mistakes have been made before. On the other hand, if it wasn't engineered and the vaccine is actually effective, which we have yet to see considering the variants, it's a huge coup for science. Like it's a really like science saves the world moment, like an actual superhero moment. I'm not hopelessly pro-science. I'm actually pretty critical, but I don't mind, like science. I don't mind the tetanus vaccine. I'm glad I never got polio. Like there's certain things where I'm like, I still believe homeopathy might work. In fact, I think vaccines are a form of homeopathy. Okay. Like a very small poison to stop a big poison. But I just am sort of putting it out there that there are things we could do that would be more fun than everybody sticking to the screen as much as possible and sort of dying from inaction and inertness of the inside world.
I'm going to put that out. Could our COVID response be more fun? And this goes out there as well to the people watching online. Are we lacking a sense of fun in this? You mentioned the Zorb balls. We've got that behind my second image. But could we be having more fun here, Dave?
I know this is I'm not sure if anyone watches mainstream Saturday night TV here, but there's this game show called The Wheel with Michael McIntyre and like celebrities that they spin round. But the thing about it is, it's kind of quite clever because it's a kind of celebrity game show, and there's contestants on there that's got social distancing built in, because all the celebrities are all like on this huge wheel and they're all kind of separated from each other. Right. And no one actually ever touches each other. But there's no one wearing masks, so you don't actually know that it's socially distanced. It's kind of the social distancing is built in a quite clever way, so you don't know it's happening. So I think it's kind of like quite a positive thing. It's kind of like so that kind of stuff is, I think it is true. Like, if you creative ways of, and I think going out, I mean, I think a lot of people over this lockdown have probably gone out in the countryside or gone out for walks more than they normally have, because that's kind of the only thing you can do now, so there's those kind of activities that maybe we can make a fun way of, like I say, that maybe there's a fun way of like going for a walk, they can build in something a bit more interesting about it or something. Like, I think that's what you're saying about the Zorb balls might be the extreme version of that, but something that's maybe less technically demanding that you could do to like make people make the most of that. But I mean, at the same time, I feel that interaction is just such a part of human life that we can't continue like this. Can only be a temporary thing.
Okay, so it won't last that long. Katie, you've got your hand up.
I was just thinking that to join on the point that telling people not to go out, and this is how you help, is like telling people not to think of a white elephant.
Yeah.
You can't tell someone not to do it. You have to give an option what else to do. So the government has a very long list of things which are kind of banned, but they don't have any alternatives. Like, okay, so here we are doing, let's say, these community things, or we're gonna organize some online concerts, or like online games, or anything like
yeah.
The things you can find on internet are so vast, but no one is giving any direction. You could start a fitness competition in each of the councils, where people do workouts every day and they see how far they go. It would both help with everyone's health, and at the same time it would give something for people to do and be part of something with other people.
Okay, so are we not, as a you're in Portugal there, and Christine's in Norway, but let's talk about all the different countries we're in. Are those countries actually putting enough effort to promote these safer activities, alternative activities? And I'm going to come back as well to Adam's point about the alternative ways of dealing with the virus as well. Are we being too narrow when we're just talking about a vaccine and isolation? Are there other things we should be promoting as well, such as the right diet or stuff I think you mentioned? So there's two things. Go whatever direction you want to go with this. There's two questions there really, but it all comes to the question of, about should there be a ministry of fun in all of the countries we're calling from that is helping people? No. Yes, that's Kate. Yes, no.
That's a good idea.
No, I was just, it's such a brilliant idea. I'm shocked no one ever thought about it before, and we haven't voted for it yet.
Yeah, well, it sounds a bit Orwellian, to be honest. Our Ministry of Fun might not actually be that fun.
Ministry of Culture would immediately say that they are the ones.
Yeah, probably, yeah. But are they doing enough to help us have fun at these times? I don't think they are.
Where is the Ministry of Culture during pandemic, actually? What do they do?
Their funding gets removed immediately.
Well, I say that we did try and apply for the Department of Culture, Media and Sport emergency fund, but we're not big enough, sadly. So we don't get the money.
I have a friend who was saying, sorry, I had to go because I was supposed to be like, anyway, it doesn't matter what I had to do. But I had a friend who recently was talking to me and saying, oh, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And I was thinking, and then I used it back at him. I forgot it was him who said it to me. I said, culture eats politics for breakfast. But really, I think culture eats everything for breakfast. It's a complete a hungry ghost. I just think that the idea that we are talking and like this idea of what can we do in isolation, and not everyone is in isolation, but I was actually thinking that in many ways it's the people who have had to deal with like heavy restraints their whole lives, like in their communities, that probably like know the answers to this. It's just that we're not used to asking them questions and listening. So, I mean, I actually think that there's a lot of people who are not at all bored or not at all like, you know, and are just dealing with it. But these are people who just deal with everything, like, because they don't actually have the expectation that anyone's going to help them out, and that things are supposed to be like comfortable and swell and like, and everything for them. And so, but the problem is that we don't have the channel open because we're not actually like, yeah, I think it was before in the conversation where it's like, well, you never listen to us, so like we've completely shut off the channel. Like, there's no point in talking to you. So it's maybe also about trying to. I mean, like there's all these people who have been in Europe in containment in these like horrible refugee sort of like detention camps. And I don't know if you've been following what happened in Lesbos, but it's been pretty horrific. I don't know if they rehoused or what they have done, but I mean, they've been in there for years. They've been in there for a really long time in and with nothing to do. They're not allowed to work and they're not allowed to do anything. And I think it's sort of like it would be it would pay to pay attention to what, you know, and to the actual people, like what they actually do, what is their actual culture like, and what are they doing to have fun, how did they actually survive? Because those are the people who, as things like, if you know, this is a bumpy ride we're in for, I think everyone can see that. And those people who have got the shock absorbers and who are kind of like able to roll with it, like we got to learn from them, because those are the people who are actually going to be able to adapt and so on.
Okay, well, that's a good point.
Everybody.
I just want to say welcome to Sue, who was in an earlier Talkaoke conversation. We've gone probably quite a long way from the original question, but I'm just going to very quickly fill you in on how we got there, because I think it's important. We started talking about COVID and genomics and what genomics' role in knowledge about COVID was and how to treat COVID. And then we moved on to this question about trust in scientists and why a lot of people didn't really trust the narrative that was coming, well, let's say from the public health campaigns rather than from scientists. But there's a lot of skepticism, and we talked a lot about the inequalities, the power inequalities between different groups, and those people that had no power had no real reason. And as Christine said then, and it's relevant to the conversation now, the conversational channels were never open. We've lost Dave now, but so it's worth getting a final thought. I might just try and get a final thought out of him. But yeah, so then we were there, and then we talked about, well, there is our response to, hang on a sec, let me just get this right. So yeah, so we were talking about distrust in science and about the difference between science communication, which is all about a lack of knowledge or a debate, compared to public health messaging, which is very definite. Then we talked about fear as a strategy to kind of get people changing their behavior, and are there other ways? And this is when the conversation got interesting. We started talking about other ways to address the issue of COVID, cultural ways. Are we having enough fun in this pandemic? Is there enough investment going into positive ways to encourage people to take on different behaviors that are not as dangerous? And this is when we started talking about artistic interventions, but also, Christine, in the latest thing just mentioned, are we talking to the right people? We should be talking to those marginalized people that are used to being stuck in a place, to find out what they do for fun or find out how they cope in these situations. That's where we are now with the conversation. I don't expect you to join in straight away. because it's we've come a long way. But if you feel like saying something, you know the score, just attract my attention and off you go. So hopefully that's a fair summary. Does anyone, where do we want to take this discussion? We've only got...
I could throw down a little bit unless Sue wants to go because she just got here. Sue? Okay, so I mean, first of all, I think what you're saying, Christine, is really prescient because I've worked with people as an artist in refugee camps, and a lot of times they're in jail and sort of released during the day, but not allowed to work and have to come back to the jail just to live. So they're kind of entrapped in a world where they're free without money in a place that has more money than them. And that's not true of all refugee camps, like in Greece and Lesbos, et cetera. But like when I worked in Basel, and it was, I think what you're talking about is privilege. And also like, I think one of the things that this virus does to people, whether they're willing to talk about it or not, is it's deeply humbling. And it's humbling in a way that you wouldn't expect. What people are saying is stay home, Zoom conference, as much as possible, but not everyone can do that. But besides that, it's basically saying you're not just mortal, but the screen is failing you. Because people that are able to lean on the screen have leaned on it to the point where they're really, really like their eyes hurt. The camera, they want to block the camera. They're in future shock. Like they finally reached that 80s VR dream of everybody being in the interweb, the worldwide interweb, and it's nauseating. It's so that it's not about the unreality. It's about the constant being in person in some kind of really bad TV show with very low overhead that doesn't even have like production value like this. And
basically.
So what I'm thinking is that along with that is this realization that your days are numbered, your lifespan is shortened daily, and that you're really some sort of gadget. And I think that that's where the societal critique comes in, that you're feeling like just an instrument, a sort of like a monad stuck in some kind of video that's actually being sucked at. And the suck is work, and the suck is socializing, the suck is sex, the suck is friendship and family, because it's all coming through here, like this thing. And it's all basically like sucking you out of your body, and you can't really live on the screen. It's not really life. And it's starting, I think it's getting thin, and then people are finding that they're just like everyone else.
So it's like
they're in jail like everyone else.
So it's like a sort of Tron moment, but we're kind of halfway stuck in the internet and halfway just in our home. And I should say as well, Sue, that when I did the whole summary of the 90 minutes of chat, I forgot to mention the dystopian sci-fi element, which I think is informing a lot of this conversation as well. Katie, you've got a point there. Katie, unmute yourself.
Thank you. Just to give a counterpoint, I am one of those people who is living in this kind of a virtual world now for almost a year or so. I do go out time to time, but this is what I've been doing for about a year. I mean, I personally took it as a training for interstellar travel, sitting in a closed space for a long time. Can you deal with it? And very surprisingly, I have enjoyed it so far. So
you've enjoyed it.
So whereas some people I have come across, they feel that the life is sucked out of them. For me, I feel I'm having new wind under my wings, because I found so many sources of information, so many interests, and so many things I could do and find out for which I never found the time or never was bored enough to look for. Let's put it that way. So
it's been a kind of blossoming for you.
Yes. So, and I as a straightforward example, I started participating in Talkaoke sessions, and I met very many interesting people about whom I would have never met otherwise if I was in my job instead, or in my regular circle of friends. So, and can have conversation with people from Norway when I don't know anyone from Norway.
You do now.
I do now. So,
Yeah.
so yes, it is kind of dystopian reality, but I think it's also very important how we look at it.
Yeah.
It's like our. I usually put it that way, that we can always look backwards to the past and see what we've lost, or we can choose to look forward and see what we are about to gain.
Right.
So
It doesn't
Katie,
mean
are you saying-
we are in a different place, but it's just different perspective, different
yeah.
view.
Yeah.
Katie, you're saying it's not so bad. Like it's sort of like all right to be sort of interacting with the world. And I know I like to do dress up on video. It's fun. It's fun to interact. But I even think with this Zoom thing, like, can we all hold hands for a second? Like, will you reach to the edge of your screen and
hang on,
touch
I'm going to do it with
person in the square nearest to you?
Yeah.
Oh, Katie, I want to hold your hand.
Yeah.
Oh.
I got your point. Yes, that is missing, and it's a very important part. But and I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying that maybe once we come out of it, even as a first thing, many people will value that interaction much more. I like before. Now I'm on a furlough, but before I was working as a manager in a club. So I'm almost guaranteed that the way the people come in, they will view their experience of going to a club will be much, much different. They will value it differently. They will behave differently. And so it may be a negative experience now, but a lot of times in life, we learn much more from the negative experiences than we learn from the positive ones.
Yeah. Okay. So I feel like the 2 points you made are kind of contradict each other. Sorry to be, but one thing is you're saying this is a positive experience. The other thing you're saying you learn more from negative experiences. So is it just you just insisting that this has to be a positive experience, be it a directly positive experience or a learning experience?
I'm just saying that what it is depends not only on its reality, but also very much on our perspective. So in situations when we cannot change the reality, we don't have any control over it, we still have control on our perspective.
Okay, good point. Okay, does anyone else want to come in on this? We are actually in our last sort of leg here. Kieran.
Well, one of the observations I've had, especially when I got back to work, which is a clinic where we do a lot of psychology and stuff. Anyway, is that basically people dealt with this and isolation in exactly the same way as they deal with life. So all the people that were happy before, this is just a personal observation, seem to be know how to adapt to this kind of living in a square and reading a book and getting on with it. And all the people that were despaired and depressed were depressed and despairing, and all the people that were lonely, and it just seemed to be just a direct correlation. Nothing really changed in terms of how we deal with it. And so, unfortunately, that leads to the conclusion that we the only thing we can do is try and help each other deal and equip them to deal with life.
Right. Okay. So
a big human project, how we help each other.
Whether you're living in a screen or whether you're living on real streets, the issue is still the same. How do we deal with life?
And how if we're dealing with life well, maybe how do we help other people deal with life?
Okay.
How do we spread that a little bit?
Okay, so if we are doing well, we should be spreading that to others. That's a really good point. Anyone? Sue, have you got any thoughts about this? You've been in the conversation a little bit. I know we've gone a little bit away from genomics, but that's Talkaoke for you. It's up to the people where they want to take it. Do you agree with this conjecture? Have you got anything to add? Do you disagree?
Well, I think I'm just very, very glad that we have Zoom and things like this, because, if this happened 20 years ago or more, we wouldn't have there was Skype then, I'm trying to think, but, it would have, we would have had phones. We didn't even have, I think, if this terrible thing had to happen, at least we have had the technology and the scientific ability, for the vaccines to be produced so quickly. But as to what's happening to some people, I don't know if many of you have heard, and I don't know if it's happening elsewhere, but there have been riots in the Netherlands the last few days because we've had a curfew. Well, that curfew means nothing to us because we've been shielding since day one. But you know, for a lot of people, this curfew, well, the young people in particular, it seems, are, well, they're just hitting out, which, you know, I think is absolutely terrible, because of the, you know, what the results of that are kind of are, well, someone's going to get very hurt soon, and certainly it's not safe for them all to be gathering. I mean, I suppose that's a response to them, for what's going on, you know, with the curfew. I mean, I think curfew is a good idea, but
these people writing I feel that it's been imposed upon them. They don't see the point of it themselves.
And a lot of people are using it as an opportunity just to riot and steal. And apparently, I mean, I don't know. I've not out there, but you know, cars are being set on fire, and you know, before long, someone is going to be very seriously injured or killed.
Isn't there, that comes back to this sort of idea of fatigue, right? Like being careful, and feeling your mortal precarity, like that your days are numbered or your lifespan is shortened. And then there comes that question of the quality of life. And some people see it as suicidal, and other people see it as, if this was my last month of life, would I rather be doing hot yoga or Zooming, you know? And I have some friends that are going to
terrible fucking choices.
Yeah, I mean, I have friends that are going to this ecstatic dance get together, and they're going to dance all night. It's kind of a straight edge thing, and they're going to be more than 10 people there, and they're going to be inside dancing all night to music and trying to find themselves. And I think it's beautiful, but I also think it's not the right time to be in a closed room with, you know, more than 10 people dancing all night.
Unless they all had their own vacuum cleaner air vents.
Yeah, I mean, I would thought of going myself with this thing.
Yeah.
I think it couldn't hurt, right? Just turn it on and start dancing.
Yeah. Sorry, I should just add, Sue, this is Adam's invention.
Fresh air.
It's a fresh air.
I don't know, but I sort of understand that there's a feeling like, especially among young people, they're sort of like, it might be an overreaction. It might not be an overreaction, but I'm going dancing, right? Or I'm going rioting because I can't stop my life completely for an emergency that lasts possibly for the next year or 2 or 3, you know, this kind of thing.
But sadly, it's being very selfish to other people.
Yeah, I agree.
And it's sad that selfishness is being, you know, encouraged by other selfish people, who, because some of them will just be following rather than actually thinking about what they're doing.
But Sue, I would say that statement that it's selfish in itself, it doesn't really work, because it may not be, but children are selfish, teenagers are selfish. We can't just pretend that they're not going to be. Especially in Holland, they've always rioted about all sorts of civil controls. You know, it's surprising it hasn't happened already, and it will happen everywhere eventually. It's inevitable. So the way to deal with it isn't just say you shouldn't. I don't think anyway. I think it's just sort of address.
Well, they've tried other things, and that's why they've done this curfew. But it still is everybody. It's their choice to do it, and that choice could cause someone else to die eventually.
Well, it probably will cause
and you know, everybody is responsible for themselves, and they will have to accept. You know, if they find out they then get COVID and their grandparents die, that will be on them. You know, they're conscious for the rest of their lives. They've got to think about the consequences.
Yeah, but you can't just say you've got to think about it and hope they will. I mean,
well, I'm not talking to all of them, but if I spoke to one of them, I'd tell them what I thought, and I'd like to hear what they're thinking.
I think Kieran's not disagreeing with you about the selfishness. What he's saying is that really an effective communication when these people are just going to go out and do it anyway?
Yeah, but I'm not talking to them, am I? I'm you know, they're out planning themselves at the moment. Yeah, if I could talk to them, maybe I'd explain if they feel a bit trapped. Try it for a whole year almost. You know, we've not gone out other than very, very occasionally, probably literally on one hand. I can't go back to the UK to see my eldest son and his fiance. There's loads of things.
Yeah.
And they've been going, that they, if you compare what a lot of people are having to go through, and then people not being able to see someone that's dying, they need to open their eyes and actually see what's happening to other people.
It might be nice if we can sort of, I think we were talking about this, but kind of make it stimulating to be sterile, like to talk about different levels of containment and biosafety and HEPA filters in a way like this sort of thing that I put together was an inter-orificial economy suit. And the idea was that you'd have sort of adapters to plug and play between all your different orifices, like your genital orifices and your eyes, your ears, your nostrils, your urethra, and your nipples could be connected wirelessly or wired like this. And then people could be safe and communicating with all of their orifices at once in a way that's massively interactive, but also able to walk around that way. I mean, you might fall down occasionally, but there's this sort of feeling that there's a togetherness in distance that's it's sort of rehabilitating instead of
I mean, I'm going to sort of sum that up is this could be fun. It could, being safe could be fun, and there could be, I think this goes on to some of the other questions that we were having before, that sometimes, it's been a lot of the communication has been about fear and about kind of negative consequences, but have we done enough to look at the kind of fun ways to actually be safe, or the fun ways to interact in a safe way? And would that be a more effective message to young people that are getting bored? But there's also another thing that I wanted to, because you're being forced to self-isolate. And earlier on, Christine was talking about marginalized communities that are forced to self-isolate because they, for example, refugees that are actually stuck in one place, they can't move. So are we learning enough from those people that are stuck in one place? And are we finding out their ways of actually coping with that, which is another point. It's up to you. We've only got 3 minutes left, so it's only time really now for final thoughts. Christine.
Yeah, I think that there's, I would say, I agree, like that there needs to be a way to give people agency and also to listen. I think protest is actually really important. And I think that it's been important all the time. And so I'm a little bit like, I understand, and I understand your frustration, and I understand the risks that are being taken. I also see that that like I recently adopted a dog and just like did this crash course in dog training. And there's this book called Don't Shoot the Dog, and she talks about positive reinforcement, and positive reinforcement not only works for dogs, it works for humans and dolphins. It works for clams. Like literally they've done things where they try and positively and reinforce. And negative reinforcement, essentially the carrot versus the stick, well, the stick doesn't work. The stick doesn't work very well. And the stick has a lot of toxic spin-offs that comes off it. And so people start to dig in their heels. And if you just look at what's happening in the United States, like I've been out of the States for 20 years, but it's just been so like crazy to see. And this thing is that as like, but like lots of people are frustrated about the lockdown. Like Valentine's mother, she's from Germany, and she immediately, it just brought her right back into like a complete distrust of the government and all the things that these things that happened in World War II like are so deep for people. And I'm not justifying it. I'm totally not legitimating it. I'm just saying that maybe also something that Katie was saying, like, I think that ultimately, and I don't achieve this very often, but this idea that things are really neither good nor bad, and that we need to talk to each other, and like things are happening. There's going to be backlash. There's going to be people who are going to, and we have to deal with it in a certain way. And like, I would say that in my experience, both as a filmmaker and just as a person, when I read this thing about positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement, and just like the behavioral science of it, whether it's addiction or whatever it is that you've got, that like, whether it's social or personal or so on, like, I think that that's true. And that when we come down hard with the stick, we are going to get a lot of unintentional consequences. And so we need to really reserve that for, like, this pandemic is going to keep going on. That's clear. The vaccine is here. It's not over. So it's sort of like, how do we deal with each other, and how do we deal with our frustrations and everything? And I hear you, Sue, because I do feel that. And I also felt like, they stormed the Capitol building, and I was just like, what the, like, but at the same time, I think hating on them just makes it worse, actually. I'm not saying they shouldn't be punished or anything. I'm not saying that, but I also see that the dynamic isn't actually going to get better from that.
Okay. So we could be at the tip of the dystopian iceberg here. But that, I'm going to take that as your final thought, Christine.
That's my final thought.
But I'm going to go around the train because we actually over time now, so we may have gone off of the genomics conference. This might just be us now. So, but let's just get a final thought.
Still live, don't worry.
We're still live. Okay, we are still live. Yes.
But yes, wrap up.
Yes, it's time to wrap this up. Thank you, Rebecca. Have you got a final thought, or do you want to? Katie's got a final thought. Yeah.
I think our discussion about how people have like a backlash to various rules and regulations and so on ties very well into our starting topic of genomics, because in that area we observe pretty much the same results. People have a backlash when they hear about it, when they imagine what results may come out of it, how dystopian the future may become just because of further research and popularity of it. But I think Christine's point is really, really great about the reinforcement, and I would mostly agree with it. But in some situations, I think, and this COVID situation is closer to that, is like when you see someone standing in the middle of the road and the car approaching, you just knock them over without putting much care whether they will get a bruise or not. And even though you could try to persuade them to get off the road, it might just take too much time and maybe get run over. So I think society needs to balance this out, and both sides need to understand that in some cases, that curfew or that lockdown may be like pushing someone from the road to save them from being run over. And yes, we may have a further discussion whether I had the right to touch you or whether it was the right thing to do. But from in some situations, there's just no time to waste, so to speak. And seeing how fast the COVID is spreading, I think it comes fairly close, if not exactly like that.
Okay, this is an emergency situation where do we have time to debate this and to come up with all these alternative fun ways of dealing with the situation?
Yeah, with thousands of new infections every day, so many infections every second. So every second we discuss, there are potentially more people dying. So how long discussion is acceptable?
Okay, that's a really good point. Let's get some other final thoughts. Kieran, have you got a final thought?
Yeah, I think just to add a sort of another layer to that whole thing is that, I think that, like Christine says, that this vaccine, who knows how effective it's going to be. We've got new variants coming along. It's just going to go. I think this is a long game, and we're not really addressing the problems of youth and their frustration. They feel like, our generation have had their life and they're not having theirs, a very, very important development age and a very rebellious time. So yeah, we can lock them up this time, arrest them, but that is not going to deal with the problem. So I think actually governments need to look at that fast and act on it. and stop sort of, you know, basically frustrating them. Maybe they need some money, for fuck's sake. Sorry, I keep swearing. Maybe they need some money. I mean, the English ones are complaining about the fact they've got no chance to get money, and they've got no cash, they've got no spending money. Their mums haven't got extra money to give them. You know, there's a situation where I just think, yeah, you know, they need a bit of slack cut to them in some way or other.
All right, so in a way there's the emergency, but also there's a longer term thing. This isn't going to go away tomorrow. So that perhaps both things together. Sue, have you got a final thought?
We were saying about the teenagers, for very young children, that they haven't even got a memory of anything different. One friend reported that her little girl said, "Will we ever be able to see grandma again?" You know, because to her, however long it's been, was
that her life.
Such a long time. You know, and but yes, I mean, yes, for when you're for young, you know, youngsters, time seems a lot longer as well, so it's a lot harder for them. But they still have responsibilities to others, and they need to be taught that.
Okay, so in a way, it's a bit. Adam, you've got a final thought?
Sure. I mean, I think one of the things about feeling pixelized, like feeling just part of the human species and sort of like a cog in a bioinformatics machine, is that we're being processed, our genomes are being processed and put up online as if they are us. And in some ways they are us. We are ATs, Gs and Cs. We are kind of these bioinformatics sequences. But besides that, we're made of random chance. The fact that we're here, that we have hands, that we have earlobes, like all the morphological parts of our body came from mistakes. And some of those mistakes are actually viruses that mutated us that are still involved in our genome, like they've incorporated. Not all viruses cause mutations that cause death. Not all of them, not all parasites kill you. They actually become you. They become symbiotic with you over time. And this may be, we may be on the cusp of a leap. I doubt it. But what I wanted to say is that the other half of natural selection, of fitness, of trying to technologically overcome this disease, is that we're made of gambling. We're made of molecules that have gambled to form lungs that happen to be infectable by viruses, but also breathe, that we move in and out, that we excrete. I mean, one of the problems is that we excrete, right? We breathe in and out. And so we have this entire metabolic system is not just some digitized sequence on the internet inside of a bioinformatics database, but is also a weird mutagenic gamble that consistently and constantly is changing. And that's why we relate to fish and dogs and even squid, because we can see that we're related to squid. Yeah. But I think that we have to remember that we're already a gamble.
Okay, so it's in a way, it's about re-evaluating life, incorporating risk. Rebecca, have you got a final thought? Have you been...
No, I think that that's everything that could be said has been said.
Okay, so that's the end of today's session. If you want to come back, thanks everyone for taking part. We will be back tomorrow, and you're all very, very welcome. Thanks so much. It's been fascinating and enlightening. Maybe tomorrow we'll talk about genomics a little bit, but it's been mentioned. We've passed through the genomics and out the other side. Lots of food for thought. Thanks very much. If you don't know, now you know. That's the wrong button again. It's time to go.
I'm afraid I have ended the event now, so now it is just us. Just letting you know.
Nice meeting you all. Thanks for calling me like this morning. Take care. Signing off.